When it comes to the authors, these aren't necessarily my favorite authors or the authors that I read the most, but they're the authors that have had a profound impact on my life. The first one is Sherman Alexie. Really, he's representing a group of authors. He's representing Thomas King, Louise Erdrich, Joseph Boyden, Richard Wagamese, basically the group of Indigenous authors that I discovered probably starting in my mid-20s. Now, as an Indigenous person myself and a huge reader, you can see how profound that is to make it to 25 years old without ever reading something by one of your own people. So being an avid reader when I was young, it never dawned on me that Indigenous people could also have that incredible talent. So I chose Sherman Alexie because his book, 10 Little Indians, is a collection of short stories, and it opened my mind to a whole new world. And then I looked for everything Sherman Alexie. And the thing with Sherman's writing is every single sentence is a piece of artwork. He doesn't throw any sentences away. It takes me so long to read his books because so often I'll read a line or a paragraph and then I have to stop and say, whoa, I have to go back and read that again. Like it was like a song. It was so beautifully put together. The next one is about as far from Sherman Alexie as you can imagine, Jane Austen. Even though I'm an Indigenous girl in 2016 living in Canada, I have a fascination with that entire UK English, the country rose kind of thing. Her books to me are lovely because there's always that one main character who's a little out of step, who's a little left of center, who's not quite the type of girl that is in vogue at the time. So I always feel like Jane Austen and I shared some kind of a similar bent in life. So when I found her books, and I found her books in the funniest way. I watched Bridget Jones' Diary, and I loved the movie, and a friend of mine said, well, you realize that's Pride and Prejudice. And I said, what are you talking about? I had never read Pride and Prejudice. And that's what got me reading Jane Austen. And once I kind of took one step with Pride and Prejudice, down the rabbit hole I went with all the rest of them. Those of you who are literary snobs will not at all appreciate my next selection, Stephen King. And I am so defensive of Stephen King when people say, oh, that's not literature, he's too prolific. Can you imagine being a writer who's being penalized because you have too many stories in your mind? I think his writing is so accessible. I feel that there are people who put together really wonderful language, and then there are writers who are great storytellers. Every now and then you find somebody who's both, and I really think Stephen King is both. It was also the first time I had ever heard Micmac, which is what it was then, which is, of course, who I am, mentioned in a book, so that turned me on. The first book that I ever read of his was Carrie, and I was not that much older than the character Carrie at the time, and there has never been a Stephen King book that I haven't loved. So he's definitely a huge part of my reading life, and I couldn't do a video like this without mentioning him. Number 4 on my list, Margaret Atwood, an amazing Canadian writer. I went to the library. It's a French town, so the librarian didn't necessarily know what I was talking about right off, but she said, yeah, I think we've got something by her. And I found The Edible Woman and read that and was in love. And that really opened my mind to what people call literature. I feel like reading Margaret Atwood at the age of 15, 16, that's when I matured into a mature reader. And from that day to this, she has always been one of those authors that stand out for me. My favorite of all her books, Alias Grace, I recommend it all the time. An incredible Canadian gem. And the final one on the list, Dominick Dunne. I love his books. I've read everything he's ever done. I really love them. But what about that author really inspires my life is Dominick Dunne started as a producer in Hollywood. He was living the high life, rubbing elbows with all the important people. And then he absolutely crashed and burned. I mean, his whole career tanked. And then at 50 years old, when he's like ashamed of his social circle, the man starts a brand new career as a writer and has this incredible life. When he passed away, Vanity Fair did, I think it was a 15 or 17 page spread on his life with them, and that life only started at 50. I'm 47. That's like I could have 2 more major life mistakes and still start a career that would be amazing for anybody to have at any age. How amazing is that? That when one thing totally imploded, he didn't call it a day. He didn't pack it up. His daughter gets murdered. He uses that as something to fuel a whole new chapter of his life. And the man wrote till the day he died. So how could I not be inspired by Dominick Dunne? Plus, his stories are just amazing. If you like, Thomas Wolfe, Bonfire of the Vanities, A Man in Full, if you enjoyed those books, you will absolutely love Dominick Dunne. And if you ever get a chance to go online and read some of the pieces he did for Vanity Fair, also incredibly inspiring. So there it is. Those are the 5 authors who have changed my life. Hope you enjoyed it. Give us a thumbs up or a comment if you did, and make sure you check out some of the other videos in this series. Thanks for watching.